English at Emory, and an author of many books, including The Dumbest Generation, How the Digital Age Stupefies Young Americans and Jeopardizes Our Future, or Don't Trust Anyone Under 30. and The Digital Divide, it's called, right? And he'll be signing books after this discussion. I want to mention, too, that right after this talk, we have an opening for not only the Einstein manuscript, which is on view here, but also this beautiful Persian show, Azadi Va Adalat, and we'll be doing some remarks about both of those. I'll point out to you, again, all these many things to pick up, but we've got a lecture series. We have more than 20 events this spring at the museum. So for those of you who are members, thank you. For those of you who would like to renew, this is a lot for your membership, and I encourage you. We have next week, we have another opening tomorrow night for Georgia Watercolor, and many, many things coming up. So again, Dr. Bauerlein, thank you for starting off this big series. Welcome. Thank you.
All right, thank you. It's great to be here. I have a thick pile of papers, but it's not a recorded printed speech. This is the 1920 English edition of Einstein's book Relativity. And when I came in, I went over and saw the manuscript there, and to look up and see, here's Appendix 3 right here in this book, and there it is. In manuscript, I felt the gravity of the situation. That just came up. I didn't realize. But I'm just going to talk for 20, 25 minutes or so, and open it up informally. And Salter asked me to come and talk a little bit about Einstein and the humanities. That's my world. And to reflect, if I could, on this edition from which the appendix comes. And so I got it, printed it up, and read through it, and was surprised that if I took it very slowly, I could understand a lot of Einstein's presentation. And there was a particular reason, I think, why I could do so. And I'm going to get to that as part of the issue here with this connection with the humanities. Now, on one superficial level, it's obvious ways in which Einstein and relativity relates to the humanities, in that the new humanities, as opposed to the old humanities, we have forms of relativism or skepticism, epistemological skepticism, which prevail. And by that I mean, in the old days, the humanities in literary studies, in my area, was very much oriented around certain set foundations. And the foundations often were what went by the name, by the mid-20th century, would be the canon. Those great works that had solidified as English as a discipline developed. They were a core. They were even called a core. They were the center of the field. This is where you began. They were the foundation of literary study, indeed, of humanistic understanding. And the idea was to develop forms of inquiry. I'm not even sure if inquiry is the right word. Well, there was some historical and bibliographical inquiry that would take place, but methods of interpretation might be more accurate to say, to get at the meaning of these works, to understand what their truth was. Truth, not truth in the strict scientific sense, but what are the core themes? What are the basic guides? What are the implications that we find in this dense literary language? And that there was a goal, and that you would get there and come up with a full understanding of that work if we could get our methods right. Well, those two orientations have collapsed in the last 30, 40 years. First of all, the humanities are now a much more multicultural endeavor. we have a hard time now in literary studies saying, these are the works. This is the center. Everyone has to study this. We are multicultural. We're much more diverse in this way, and so it is very difficult. I've been in meetings where we're drafting curricula. I've been in high school standards meetings. I worked on the Common Core English standards. In fact, and when it comes time to identifying central works, everyone in the room gets nervous. Everyone starts saying, no, you can't choose that. What about these? And what you usually end up with happening is, as you got in the state of California, the high school recommended reading list for high school has about 4,000 works. Okay? So everything is diffused on really what you would call cultural relativism or multiculturalism that breaks up, again, the foundationalist idea of certain contents, certain things, the old-fashioned Western civilization or the great books program. That's gone. We're much more relativistic about our values and what we choose to set up as worthy of study. The second way in which forms of relativism have come into literary studies bears upon this idea of interpretation. Okay? Nobody in my world, if you want to retain your respect or prestige in the field, would say, we're going to get at the truth of this poem. We are going to pull out the core meaning. No, we interpret. And we reinterpret. And then we interpret again and again. We follow Nietzsche's aphorism, there are no facts, only interpretations. Every reading that you come up with of a poem is understood as perspectival. Right? It's based upon a set of premises that you share and that we bring into play people's interests, their acculturation, their background, their ideological makeup. These elements amount to, again, a form of epistemological skepticism about knowledge in these areas. Knowledge is never quite set. Readings are never quite firm. Nothing is set in stone. We are anti-foundational about the arguments that we make. Everything is provisional. Everything is a position. You occupy this standpoint, you that standpoint. Okay, you see the obvious connections with relativity in its popular conception. The conception that there is no standing point that is outside a relative position. Okay? Nothing in the universe is a focus of orientation for everything else. It is instead in a relative position to other things. There is nothing in the universe that is outside. Well, God stands outside. When God, as far as I can see, Einstein believed in God. I'm not quite sure what God that was, but God is not in the universe. God is not a thing there. God is outside, beyond this positioning that takes place with relativity. And you can see this, again, popular conception come up in this text. Now, what I just want to point out is beyond that obvious relationship between humanities and Einstein today is another relationship that I think is more interesting, frankly. And it really has to do with, as I mentioned at the beginning, the way in which Einstein presents his theory. How does he get there? What does the exposition rely upon? In the humanities, we're always looking at images and metaphors and rhetoric, not always the truth of something, but how something is said, how it's framed, how it's set up, what is the structure of it, and I think it applies here very, very well. Now, before getting to that, let me say what another German thinker identified as the core of the humanities. Where did the humanities begin? Why do we even have any disciplines? importance of literary study. Why do we have to have a study of poetry? Poetry long existed, the critical study of it. Why does that even happen at all? Why do we have separate departments for art history? And this really comes down to, I think, the best point for this comes down to the work of Immanuel Kant and his work in aesthetics. And what Kant said was, there are certain kinds of experiences that we all have, the way the mind works. His first critique was the critique of pure reason, which was basically how cognition happens. And cognition here is the process by which things become intelligible. How do we take in objects in the world through this, what he called the manifold of sense, and sense perception, and it all makes sense. It coheres into a meaningful world. How does that happen? Well, we have certain rational functions in the mind. We have categories, and we arrange things and order our experiences in ways that make a world in which we can function and talk about it and reflect upon it. That's the cognitive process. The why of things, understanding what things are, how they exist. He also, in the second critique, laid out something called the critique of practical judgment. Practical judgment was about moral determinations. Pure reason asks about the why of things. What is it? Practical reason asks about, is it good? Is it bad? Okay. And our world is filled with moral experience. And we're trying to determine what is the nature of that moral experience. So there's another kind of experience not covered by either one. And this is the topic of the third critique, the critique of judgment, which was an aesthetic experience, the experience of either beauty or sublimity. And it's this kind of experience. You walk into a museum, you pass by a painting, and you don't know why. That's a matter of pure reason. You don't know whether it's good or bad, but you stop. You look at it. Your eye is drawn to it. You are arrested for a moment, and all you say is, that's beautiful. You don't get beyond that. Why is it beautiful? Well, once you start doing that, you leave that aesthetic moment behind. You start applying categories. You start saying, well, I like pictures of such and such, and it has a good message. No, Kant said, no, that's not really it. You listen to music. You turn on, you listen to the opening of Wagner's Tristan and Isolde, the first 3 minutes. You hear that chord, you go, I want to hear that again. It's like everything stops, and you're absorbed in the sight of it, the sound of it, and you just contemplate it. You just hear it. You just see it. You don't analyze it yet. That's when reason kicks in. But it is this moment where you are wholly immersed in the object and you're open to receiving it. You see it in its full physical condition. Oral, perspectival, spatial. That is the fundamental, what we call it, the judgment of taste. But because we have those experiences, that is why we have the humanities. If certain objects didn't do that to us, if we didn't find certain things beautiful, we wouldn't really need to devote disciplines to them, or at least humanistic disciplines. We can approach them as social scientists, but that is not so much interested in the beauty of those things. That's interested in other things, like the monetary value, how things circulate in mass culture. Those are certainly inquiries that can happen. But when we are going to focus on the humanities and a humanistic experience, this is where we begin. It's not about, there are some great books out there that we all must read. That's secondary. And it's not about what humanities people often substitute as the real point of humanities now, is to develop critical thinking, critical reflection, tools of social and cultural analysis, understanding identity issues of race and class and gender and sexuality. That activity, that critical, analytical activity, that's secondary. That's not enough to sustain the humanities. What we really have to have is that magical moment when an object seizes you, right? And you want to stay with it. Right? Again, it stops the course of experience for a moment. It halts your mind. It's a moment of arrest. Okay? That's what happens in the aesthetic moment. This is what Kant lays this out and explains. Once we start trying to explain that moment, then we're starting to do something else. But of course, we're compelled to explain it because it affects us a lot. We want to know why this happens. And so we're always looking into the object and analyzing, trying to determine. I mean, this is why often people reread the same thing. Right? They look at the same painting, sculpture. They listen to the same music. Right? To have that moment. Again, because it's a wonderful moment. Right? This contemplation of beauty or sublimity. Right? There was a sublime sunset in Atlanta last night. Did you see that? The bright orange pink out there. And you love looking at it. Right? Why? Well, that's a mystery. Why? Okay, so that direct perception, that focus on the object, to try to see it as it is and hear it as it is. How does this relate to Einstein? Okay, his goal is to outline relativity to interested laypersons, right? Not physicists. This was the goal. He lays that out in the opening pages. It's very short chapters in this book, in tiny pages. And here is chapter 3. He has laid out a few of the basics of classical mechanics, and now he's going to space and time. In the second paragraph, he says, out of the blue, I stand at the window of a railway carriage which is traveling uniformly and drop a stone on the embankment without throwing it. I'm just there, stick my hand on the window and drop it. Okay? This is a scene. Something simple happens. Then, disregarding the influence of the air resistance, okay, I see the stone descend in a straight line. See that? What I see, not what happens in physical, mechanical, Euclidean or Cartesian or Newtonian terms, what I see, what my mind registers. I see a drop in a straight line. A pedestrian who observes the misdeed from the footpath off the train notices that the stone falls to earth in a parabolic curve. I see this, that person out there sees that. You see, it's all based upon perception, what the eye registers. This is a scientific treatise, highly abstract physics. No, I'm just taking an ordinary situation. Something happens. What does this person here see? What does that person there see? Actually, without trying to explain what goes on, he says, I now ask, do the positions traversed by the stone lie in reality on a straight line or on a parabola? Okay? That would be the scientific question. Which is it? What is the stone really doing apart from the way I see it, apart from the way the person on the embankment sees it? Einstein gives the wrong answer to the question for classical science. The stone traverses, this is after a few sentences, the stone traverses a straight line relative to a system of coordinates rigidly attached to the carriage, the train car. But relative to a system of coordinates rigidly attached to the ground, it describes a parabola. Okay? It is a straight line from the train. It is a parabola from the embankment. Okay? Now, I don't want to make a big thing. It's real simple. But the interesting thing is he doesn't try to resolve it. Let's stay with what people actually see. Let's take this simple act and hold on. What is going on here? What is happening in the eyes of in the people who are experiencing it? Okay. The first thing is, it is relative to one system on the train. There's a whole other system of coordinates on the embankment, which makes the rock different. Okay. This obviously relates to that perspective issue of that aesthetic experience. Now, he adds, in successive chapters, he keeps coming back to the train. He says, well, what if a bird flies by? Well, from the train, you're going to see the bird do this. From the embankment, you're going to see that. Both of them actually will see a straight line, although the straight line will be slightly different from each perspective. I'm going to wrap this up quickly. He adds another element. The train is moving, and he says, okay, well, what about a man walking inside the train car? So that you're not just stationary anymore, you get up and you start to walk. Well, he gives the classical expression, which is, well, how fast is the man going? Well, it's the speed of the train car plus the speed of his walking relative to the train car, right? So you do time plus the difference that he covers in the train car, and then you can add that to the movement of the train car itself. But Einstein says that simple formula, this plus this, we shall see later that this result, which expresses the theorem of the addition of velocities, adding speeds, the two speeds together, employed in classical mechanics, cannot be maintained. In other words, the law that we have just written down does not hold in reality. So what you've actually seen, the tradition, it doesn't work. So things are suddenly getting complicated, but we're still in this train car. He then adds, famously he adds light. Okay. What if you are in the train car walking and a beam of light outside on the embankment shoots by? Okay. From the embankment, the light is going to go a certain speed. Well, by the traditional rules, if you're on the train car going in the same speed, the light is going to be slower relative to you than to a person standing still on the embankment. But Einstein says, no, this can't work. We've got an experimental finding that says light, the speed of light is constant. No matter what, it's constant. Something is wrong here, just based upon these two experiences. What the person on the bank sees as the light go by, and the person in the train sees it as the light go by. Anyway, I'm stopping there. I think I've gone a little too long already. But the point is, if you look at these chapters, he's created a little set piece. We have a setting, we've got action going on, and we have a refusal to leap toward abstractions. We have a resistance to going toward the standard laws to explain something. Instead, we remain in the actual experience of this one on the train, this one on the embankment. Just that presentation, that's what struck me when I read over this volume. And it wasn't just a brief illustration. The whole thing is derived. I mean, he goes several pages onward. He keeps coming back 5 times. He comes back in these open. Let's go back to the carriage. Let's go back and take a look at what happens in that car. So this is, I think, a methodological procedure that, again, it just complements. I'm not making any causal change here. This is one way in which we can see how this theoretical physics shares that humanistic ground with, you see something. What do you see? Just look at it. Hold off on theorizing it. Hold off on explaining it. Let's just take it in, and out of the concrete fact, we find there's something wrong here. That's how the argument proceeds. And that, I think, is part of the appeal of Einstein. People love a good illustration. They love if you can make something concrete. And that Einstein has this, this work of genius, this conceptual genius would begin here and stay here for so long before the mathematical equations come in much later. That explains part of the compelling nature. This is one of the reasons why we find that guy still such a powerful, compelling mind. Why he's like a myth in the 20th century. So I'll stop there. Open it up to comments. Yes.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on a nice talk. I think you made a wonderful point of distinguishing between this initial impression that Einstein would have and that you could take into art. And it's brought out really by the statement over here, people like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persisting illusion. Now that statement actually he wrote to Michelle Besso's wife when Michelle Besso died. That was his best friend. And despite the fact that he did not think time was an illusion, on a human level he realizes that the heart and the soul have this conception of time that's flexible and that can be distorted by events such as your level into death, and that she might find some consolation in that. Yes, he did die early, but in our world, in the world of physics that Michelle Besso and Einstein lived, that could be an eternity, or it could be a millisecond. And so I think you pointed that out in bringing the human factor with the physics factor, and there are two levels there.
And you know, the hard part, and why this illustration is so helpful, the hard part is that you say Einstein is trying to break up an illusion that space and time are much more fixed and linear, constant. No, they're not. But to get away from that is, in many ways, to go against much of our ordinary experience, and also our conditioning. Right? I mean, when Einstein says, "Look, here it looks to you like just a straight line. It looks over there like a curved parabola." It's sort of hard for us to take that in and say, "Wait a minute, things are different if you're here or there." Well, in a way, we can't live that way, right? We can't communicate unless we assume a common reality to things. Einstein sort of says that there is another way of thinking about this, but it's very hard to break free of that. I think that's probably why he uses the word illusion. It's a strong word.
Could somebody read that statement loudly that's over there? That one that the gentleman read.
I can't quite read it.
I can read it. People like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between, no, I can't see it. Past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. As the gentleman pointed out, it was a letter he'd written to the widow of his best friend, trying to console her.
And just note, he says, believe in physics. This is not a form of unbelief or no. We believe in something else. We believe in so. Was there? Yes.
So you began by pointing out that nowadays everything is relative in, say, the world of the humanities, the world of politics.
The cultural world, certainly the political world.
But even Einstein had a touchstone. He had a constant, and it was the c in mc squared, which was the speed of light. Do you think that's something that's needed in the humanities, something along those lines?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the humanities are suffering because, not because of multiculturalism itself, but because multiculturalism has yielded to them a crisis of confidence. It is that my colleagues would have a very hard time standing up in a faculty-wide, university-wide faculty meeting and saying, every student should read this and this and this and this. It should be a required course for every student here. I don't think the scientist would have that kind of inability to say, everyone should have this basic math course. I think that we in the humanities are deeply nervous, anxious about the grounds of our field. We don't have grounds for them anymore. Critical thinking, certainly critical thinking is not a ground because scientific method is a very sophisticated form of critical thinking. We can't claim that as special for us. So I think that we are searching in the humanities for some place to give ourselves strength and confidence. I think that identity issues are one area of saying here we can have a moral conviction about what we do. I think that right now at Emory we're going all in for sustainability and disability in the humanities. I don't see that as a sustainable approach either. I think that these are acts of desperation and that people are struggling. And it's one reason why the humanities are, I feel, a fading enterprise. When I started college in 1977, you couldn't be a major university if you didn't have a flagship major English department. I don't think that's true anymore. I think the humanities are pretty much a marginal part of the campus now. You know, only less than 12% of students major in any humanities. In literary studies, English used to collect 8% of all majors. Now it's about 3.5%. Market share is, you know, I know people hate that language, but it's gone down. Undergraduates are not coming to us. All of the foreign languages only collect 1.05% of all undergraduate majors. All the foreign languages, and half of those are in Spanish. Anyway, I didn't mean to go off on that. So, although we can pursue that if you want to, if you want to talk about that. Yes, sir.
Might be worth commenting. That's a very odd quote, and we can overuse it. I spent a bit of time last semester in modern physics, showing from Einstein's relativity that within relativity theory, there is no way two observers can disagree as to the chronological order of events. They can disagree on how much time there is between events, but they cannot disagree that A precedes B. If one of them sees event A preceding B, then any other observer must also see A preceding B. So you can misread that to imply relativism in the ordering of events, that is past, present, future. It does not exist within relativity theory. Within special relativity, within general relativity.
But can't you hear something that happens after something? Can't you hear, if you're close to something and far away, the speed of sound, can't you get the order wrong if you,
you cannot get the time order of events wrong. Or somebody's made a mistake.
Okay. So you can determine if there's a mistake. Right. Someone's made a mistake.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So as someone in the sciences, I can kind of find a certain beauty in stepping out of the initial moment of awe and like sort of like the beauty of a really good mathematical proof or just a really cool function. But you know, you're talking about the beauty of that moment when you see the painting or when you hear that song. Do you think that stepping into that moment in the humanities then detracts from the beauty? Like, is it important for us to hold that moment because it makes that more special?
You know, this is the challenge of good criticism. What good criticism does is enhance that moment. You know, what good criticism allows you to go back to that moment, and it's richer. It's a fuller occasion. Bad criticism leaves you, you're not helped in that initial experience by it, and it's so easy for criticism to miss what is really important in that moment of experience, why it might be so compelling. And also criticism has to accept, you know, you're never ever going to get the full power of the work of art. You're always going to be in a parasitical, inferior mode. We are going to keep reading Paradise Lost. We're going to profit from great criticism on Paradise Lost. But if the criticism ever becomes better than the work of art, more interesting than the work of art, what that means is the criticism is becoming an independent work of genius, which can happen on its own. And we appreciate that independently of Paradise Lost. But math, this is why we get a Bachelor of Arts in math, right? Because math can be elegant. Math has beauty. Math is the music of the spheres, right? So they were part of the quadrivium. Right? But look, a proof can be a beautiful thing. Absolutely. Yes.
This is a stupid question, but one hears so much about STEM courses and how fewer and fewer students are taking humanities courses because they've got to have science, math, technology, whatever, and that is an important part of our society. But I think that's leaving out the heart of something that you're kind of talking about, and the issues you're talking about, the confusion, the not sure where it is a time of growth for the society. But if we go over to that absolute STEM thing, we're leaving out maybe the beauty of mathematics and all
well,
of
this
art.
this is one of the huge issues, right, in not only higher education but secondary education as well. Today, there's the big push for the STEM fields, and I think it's going to continue, even as everyone regrets the loss of the liberal arts as the center of the university. But look, when tuition is very high, people start thinking beyond education, knowledge for knowledge's sake. Students will think less and less about the goal of becoming a learned person of discrimination and taste. It's not going to be a goal when they feel the pressure so much of the post-college years coming down upon them. I mean, I have to say that I would not want to be an undergraduate. I was at UCLA. It took 5 years to graduate. I was drunk most of my, but I read a lot. But people, my friends, they actually studied a lot. They worked hard, but there was a lot of, it was the 70s, so it was party time. But we didn't feel just this enormous burden of money, of meritocracy, of achievement. You didn't feel like if I screw up this semester, my life is over. that hits many kids, especially the AP kids who are on their way. I mean, and also when I started in 1977 at UCLA, there was the quarter system. Tuition was $134. So money, I worked part-time all through college, so I was able to pay for college with working 20 hours a week. We couldn't do that today. You couldn't support it with a part-time job. So I think that that's going to make taking that course in Baroque architecture a low priority, and trying to get an engineering degree, going into chemistry is let me put it this way. Was it a white coat ceremony? You know what? Actually, I'll come back to that if we have time. I was at a white coat ceremony at Penn, and it was an illumination for me. It was for my nephew, and I'll go into that. But first, yes.
I was just going to say, as a current student, not to deny the pressure of getting a job after college, or not to take away from the beauty of the humanities, but in my opinion, it's not that students aren't seeking out to learn more, but we've been taught that we can learn what beauty is and what truth is, not just in humanities, but in chemistry and biology and math and even business models and economics can be beautiful for students who are passionate about it. So it's not that we're not seeking out the truth and the heart of what learning wants, what learning compels us to do. It's that students are seeking it out in our own avenues.
I agree with that. But I would add this. I'm betraying my traditionalist high culture biases, and that is, if you reach age 25 and you haven't read the Odyssey and King Lear and Paradise Lost and the rest, you're missing something. Something is missing from your life if you haven't worked through those materials. If you haven't sat through Tristan and Madame Butterfly and the other great operatic achievements, if you're still listening to the same music that you listened to when you were 18, something didn't happen that should have happened. There has to be cultural growth to go along with the learning in the scientific and historical growth as well. And I know that you've got a million things pressing on, demanding your time. I know that. And you're averaging 3,500 text messages a month. and you can't get out. If you're young, you're in the circuit. You can't break away. It's too hard. So this is just another burden. I know that. But I would just always make the argument, you can do it. So. Yes, sir.
Well, I was just sort of commenting on what you just listed. Isn't what you just listed sort of a relative core thing that you just said that humanities in crisis about? I mean, if humanities can't give us that list, if those of us spending $40,000 a year getting that degree in something in humanities, if we can't get that genuine list, how is anyone in our generation, how is anyone in college right now supposed to know, well, shoot, this week I need to, get a degree that's going to help me make money and benefit society, and then on top of that, I need to go see, this play, this musical, this opera.
You've taken the words out of my mouth. That's what I say. I mean, I think the humanities have made a terrible mistake. And it's not that I think multiculturalism, but we should not bring in more minority authors and women authors in literary studies. No. It is, look, we don't have a tradition of African American writing that we require. We could make a tradition out of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington and Ida Wells Barnett, critique and fiction and poetry. That's not taught, except in a very random way. Here it's taught, there it's taught. But it's not institutionalized as a core. Certainly it could be. So it's one of the promises of multiculturalism was that it would give a, say, richer, fuller, more diverse, more challenging humanities, and that this would inspire more students to take humanities courses, learn humanities content. Instead, what we've gotten is the opposite. No humanities core, no humanities curriculum, no coherence in it, and fewer students appreciating it. So I'm completely agree with what you said. And if we can't stand up and say, all of you have to read this, not only are we failing to pass along a tradition, we're not giving young people something to rebel against. We're not giving them a meaningful opposition. This is I write about a lot about this book in the Dumbest Generation book, where I blame my generation for failing the young, because we will not stand up for certain core contents and traditions which gives young people no meaningful adversary by which they can define themselves. I get emails from students all the time, and I respond to every one. And I like it when we argue, because they're forming good arguments. And if I have to say, you got me on that, I overplayed that hand. I played that evidence too strongly. That's a very good thing. To be beaten in argument by a 20-year-old, that's quite satisfying. It is a healthy condition when the generations are in some form of tension with one another. The worst thing is when the students aren't interested in us at all, except for our credentialing capacity. That's the worst thing. Indifference between the generations. Or acceptance. Non-judgmentalism. That prevailing condition that we have. We don't want to judge anymore. We want tolerance. We want, no, let's have active judgments. Let's have open forums of criticism and argumentation. And let's realize we're all part of the same civil society at the same time. Yes, ma'am.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that I'm enormously empathic to students today and the pressures that they have on them. But I do have a bias, and I was a former English major. And my feeling is that without a vehicle through which a student can become even more familiar with the human condition, which you do through literature, I don't think you get that in the sciences. I don't think you get that in any other discipline but through literature. And I think without understanding, having an opportunity in those 4 years, that's it. Everybody says college is the best time of your life. Why? Because all you have to do is study and learn and play and do all these other things. It's the real world. It's the tough part. With that incredible opportunity to be in touch with the human condition through all sorts of exposure to all kinds of literature. And to have an opportunity to grow in doing that is just an incredible experience. And I think because we see less of that, as you're articulating it, we see more jobs today like executive coaching. When in 40, 50 years ago, did executives need to be coached on how to deal with people?
One thing I tell students is I teach a lot of freshman classes by choice. And I tell them, now listen, when people are 30 years old, and they're asked, what do you wish was different about your college years? They don't say, I wish I went to more parties. That's not usually, I wish I drank more. That's not, I wish I played more sports, more intramurals. No, they tend to say, I wish I'd taken a little more history, right? A little more art history. Because I can still play sports when I'm 30. The chances to do art history, to learn about those, that's pretty much gone. And so those 4 years, they are unique time in people's lives. They're different from any other time of life. This is one of the reasons why college is so significant in American life today, because it is this unique moment, and it's changing. The nature of the college experience is much different from just 20 years ago, I would say. Yes, yes.
I'm realizing there may be a number of people who are not familiar with Oglethorpe, and I might not be the best spokesperson about this, but Oglethorpe still has a very robust core. And there are texts that are, and of course this is a debate, I'm sure, more than I even know or care to know among the faculty about how that might change, but I've talked to a lot of current students, and it's rigorous, it's tough, it's one of the toughest cores I've ever heard about, but it's still that common experience. And if you speak with recent alumni and those who graduated 20, 30 years ago, they have a tremendous respect for the core, and it's still there.
The people at other schools, those few schools that still do have a core common experience or great books courses, they are deeply devoted to them for the rest of their lives. The alumni are the strong. Like at Columbia, you don't touch the first year great books programs because the alumni will kill you. Okay, they will cut off their money. This is loyal. That they are loyal, and I think that's a sign of they got conviction out of those courses from the school that says there's a core. The school is giving a message about this learning. You've got to do this. Whereas if you don't have a course, it's, well, you could do this, or you could do this. Are 18, 19-year-olds going to respect that? You know, they may have a great experience in those courses. I'm not saying that, or the teachers could be wonderful. But it's a different relationship to that material. Yes, sir.
Yeah. To that point, Einstein himself, as you know, was well versed in the classics. He formed this little Olympic society with his two friends, and they studied classics. So he considered that an integral part of his development.
J. Paul Getty, big oil magnate, he liked hiring classics majors more than anyone else. He wanted classics majors. And someone once asked him, what do you have this thing about classics majors? And his response was, they sell more oil. That's how he put it. They're better at it than accounting majors. Are we?
Well, yeah.